Let's listen to Pavarotti.
Hello, welcome to The Revealing. I'm your host, Pavarotti, here to give you an update on the Idaho 4 case. We did have a doc finally dropped today, and it is in regards to the hearing tomorrow. It will be a closed hearing, so we're not going to get to see it, and it is an ex parte hearing. Now, I've watched a couple of the guiltier channels today discussing this. I just watched one earlier, just not too long ago, all giddy in the fact that, I don't know why they thought it would be the Franks hearing, because you can't have a ex parte Franks hearing. In one sense, he's correct. In another sense, though, not so much, man. So let's discuss it for just a minute. Because earlier today, I heard one of the guilters out there, they just the last thing they want is this Franks hearing. Let me tell you. But they were talking about how that this wasn't going to be a Franks hearing. It was more likely a hearing because you see all the objections filed to the motions to suppress. So it was probably going to be a hearing to discuss those objections. Well, sorry, but if you look at the schedule says all ICR motions must be in by a certain date. That's why Ann Taylor all of a sudden splattered the court with all of the motions to suppress, including those Franks motions. Because if a Franks motion is filed after a preliminary hearing, or in this case it would be a grand jury indictment, well, the Franks motion has to be filed in relation to a motion to suppress. Can't be to get the thing thrown out. So it's only allowed in a motion to suppress, which is an ICR motion. There is already a preset schedule for ICR motions, and that's why you see the prosecution file all the objections to the defense's motions to suppress. They did it right on schedule, like they were supposed to. And then on, I believe it's December 20th is the last day for the defendants to respond to the prosecution's objections to the motions to suppress. Then there will be a hearing held on January 23rd for all of the ICR motions to suppress. So they're following the schedule. This ex parte hearing that's being held tomorrow has nothing to do with those. Now, it is quite possible that the ex parte hearing could be in relation to discuss the additional attorneys general that the judge awarded the prosecution. The defense did file a motion, and I forgot about that motion, but the defense did file a motion and request a hearing to give an argument on why they should not be allowed to have a unlimited team of attorney generals assisting in the case. But that does not mean that this is not going to be the Franks hearing as well. And I'll show you that here in a minute. But then I just got done listening to guilter number 2, very arrogantly saying, yep, no way it's the Franks hearing because it's an ex parte hearing. And then he went on to bring up one of the initial alibi responses from way back last year. And in that alibi response, one of the initial responses, he pulled out an obscure part where the defense asked for relief from further questions about the alibi, and that they would like an ex parte hearing to explain why they would like that relief. Judge never granted that hearing, and prosecution did not let up. And I've done many videos on the alibi. There was probably 6 different filings from the one that he brought up in relation to the alibi and responses to those. So that ex parte, whatever he was talking about, was gone a long time ago. There had been many back and forth since then. So that is a no. Good try, guy. But when it comes to a Franks hearing, let me give you the downside, then I'm going to give you the possible upside real quick. Take a look. Okay, so here is the new doc that dropped, and it says here that notice is hereby given that Brian Kohberger, by and through his attorneys of record, will call on for a closed remote hearing for the defendants. Now I want you to look at this. It doesn't say ex parte motion. It says specifically for the defendants ex parte motions. So this is more than one. So if they're calling for a closed hearing for ex parte motions, then they're doing it for more than one. There's only one motion for having a hearing to discuss the prosecution getting unlimited attorneys general. But there is two motions for Franks. In the above entitled matter on 12/11 at 2:30 p.m. or as soon thereafter as counsel may be heard in front of the Honorable Judge Stephen Hippler. So whatever this ex parte hearing is for, it's for the defendant calling for a remote hearing to discuss ex parte motions, plural. So let me show you something. Okay, so the reason that the guiltier was so confident in stating that this wasn't the Franks motion is because in a Franks motion, just like any other motion, the defense and the prosecution are both there to make an argument. The defense files the motion, files the brief and their argument for Franks, and then the prosecution would then file an objection. And then the hearing, you would hear the prosecution and the defense make oral arguments, and then the judge would rule. And a Franks hearing would typically go down like that. So it wouldn't be an ex parte. However, remember what has happened in this case. The defense filed motions for Franks hearings. Two. One on the IGG and one on something else. We know for a fact that it has something to do with the FBI and their identification of the Elantra. I have a funny feeling that it has something else as well. But did the prosecution file objections? Yeah, they did. They filed an objection. Was the objection that they filed was it an argument against the validity of what the defense is asserting in the Franks motion? No. The prosecution filed an objection stating that the defendant used too many pages in their motion and it violated the 4th Judicial District rules on number of pages allowed in a motion, which the judge quickly overruled the objection of the prosecution and said, well, if the defense would have asked, he would have allowed more pages, and in the future, the defense needs to ask beforehand. And that was it. They never filed any objections to the defense's Franks motions. They only filed objections to the motions to suppress. So, without an objection, could the Franks hearing be ex parte for some reason? You betcha, folks. Let's take a look. You see, in the context of a Franks hearing, ex parte means that a motion to challenge the validity of a search warrant is being brought before the court by only one party, usually the defendant, without the immediate presence or participation of the opposing side, the prosecution. Typically because the defendant needs an immediate ruling based on urgent circumstances, like a potential destruction of evidence, Essentially, it's a request to the judge to review the warrant's validity without the prosecutor present to argue against it at that time. Oh, you can have an ex parte hearing as it's related to a Frank's motion if you have reason to believe that the other side will destroy evidence. Imagine that. Now, the requirements to that are to be granted an ex parte Frank's hearing. The defendant must demonstrate a compelling reason why immediate action is necessary, usually involving a risk of evidence being lost or destroyed. So, sorry, guilters, you can have an ex parte Frank's hearing, and we know that there's an involving risk of evidence being lost or destroyed in this case. Not that the old, drunk guilter doesn't have a good point with the alibi, as I have stated in many videos. The prosecution has never pushed for more information on the alibi, which is beyond me. But for that to come up, the prosecution would have to initiate it. This judge is not going to go back through 10,000 pages of court documents and realize that they never settled the alibi issue, a year ago, and then all of a sudden say, hey, we need to have an ex parte hearing about the alibi without the prosecution filing a motion for it. So the defense is certainly not going to come out of nowhere and say, oh, by the way, I need an ex parte hearing so we can discuss why we're not giving you the alibi. Give me a break. And it has nothing to do with the motions to suppress, because those hearings are set in stone and this judge follows procedure. And if you can learn from what's already taken place since this case has been switched into Judge Hippler's court, then you would know this. What happened with the death penalty motions? The judge set a schedule. Have all the death penalty motions filed by this date. Have the objections filed by this date. Have the responses to the objections filed by this date. We'll hear oral arguments on this date. Followed it to a T, heard everything. They followed the procedure. He denied them all. The ICR motions are the same way. Have the ICR motions filed by this date. Defense did. Have the objections to them. Responses filed by this date. The prosecution did. December 20th, the defense will file their responses to the prosecution's objections. Then on January 23rd, they'll have the hearing for the oral arguments, then the judge will rule. The only outstanding things right now are the requested hearing for the judge's order on ordering the additional attorneys general to help the prosecution. I highly doubt that would be a closed hearing. There's nothing in a hearing about the prosecution getting additional attorneys general that would not be available to the public. Come on. But the fact that says their motions, which means more than one, tells me that this is an ex parte hearing to discuss the Frank's motions, and they're scared the prosecution may destroy evidence. So, good try, guilters, but I want to keep everybody informed properly. Now, please like and subscribe to the channel so I can keep doing this stuff for you folks. And until next time, Pavarotti is out.
Was it the fire burning in